I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Charging LIPOs is kind of like the toothbrushing of flying mini quads. If occasionally when you brush your teeth, your toothbrush would light on fire and burn your house down. What I mean by that is charging LIPOs isn't really like exciting or sexy, but it's something that we just do on a daily basis if we actually want to be able to get out and fly. And you kind of just want it to be over with as quickly and painlessly as possible. So I actually am really excited when a new charger comes out because it's the opportunity to make that charging experience just a little bit more pleasant and maybe come in at a really good price point. And that's why we're looking today at the Hobbymate D6 Duo charger, a new charger from Hobbymate, with some interesting features, and I think it slots into the existing ecosystem in an interesting place. Stay tuned. Here's how this video is going to break down. First, I want to just walk you through the interface of the charger. It's got a couple interesting features that I think you're going to want to see. Then I want to talk to you about the specs of the charger, because when you see a charger has 200 watts, 650 watts, 15 amps, the way to interpret that is actually surprising to a lot of people and doesn't necessarily mean what you think it's going to mean. And then the last thing I want to do is look at other chargers on the market and see how they stack up to this one, price for performance wise, and kind of answer the question of who's the right person, if anyone, to buy this charger. So let's start and let's go look at the shiny screen and the interface and see what features this charger has. And you can see one of the nice features this charger has is that I can actually plug it into the wall. So if you hate using a DC power supply, this may be a good charger for you. It's got a standard power plug. This is a US plug, but of course you can, this is a standard plug. You can get a cable for that. And unfortunately it doesn't reach to my plug in the wall. So I'm gonna just set that aside and plug it into this 4-cell pack, which you can also run it off of a battery for field charging. Of course, you could have like a 5 or a 6 cell or a 12 volt deep cycle marine battery that's used for charging in the field. Just plugs right into the back. Now this is a 2-channel charger, so if I want to mess with it, what I'm going to need to do is press the channel button and select either channel 1 or channel 2. I've turned off the beeping. It normally makes some beeping. For the sake of this video, I've turned off the beeping, so when you don't hear it doing anything, that's why. It's not broken. You can select channel 1 or channel 2, or you got this overview screen here. And when you click the jog wheel here, you get this menu. This menu looks awfully similar to the ISDT menu. That's where I first saw it, and I don't know the answer to whether this is like a ripoff or if it's an official something or other. But setting that question aside, we can charge, we can discharge, and they've got a function here called external discharge, which is, you see that on some higher end chargers. If you're powering the charger off of a battery, when you discharge your packs, and normally what will happen when you do a discharge cycle is it will just run the voltage through a resistor and turn it into heat. And that's why discharging is so freaking slow, because it just builds up so much heat. The fan runs like crazy, it overheats and damages. And some people say, well, you're wasting all that energy. What an external discharge does is when you plug the charger into a battery, then it discharges your packs by charging up the supply battery. And so what some people will do is they'll have a great big 6-cell LiPo, or maybe they'll have like an automotive battery, and that's what they'll use as their power supply for their charging station. And then when they go to discharge, they'll just dump the current back into the charge back into that battery, and won't be totally wasted. We've got a storage function and a balance function, and I think that the charge function has a balance at the end. I think the balance function will do balancing. I should really check that. Hold on. Let me check that. All right, so I just checked the manual to verify this. The charge function will charge the batteries fully, and then at the end of the charge cycle, it will balance them as you would expect. So then what does the balance function do? The balance function balances them at a given voltage. So for example, I've set this at 3.8, I got this battery here, I've set this at 3.81 volts, and if I start the balance, and now you can see it is going to discharge, because it's at higher than 3.81, it's discharging the batteries down to 3.81 and going to balance them at that voltage. That's kind of cool. I've often wished that there, especially when I'm putting my batteries in long-term storage, I've often wished that there was a balance function that would let me balance them at any voltage other than fully charged. And to my, as far as I can't think of another charger that does that. This is your cue to fill the comments up with other chargers that do that I'm not aware of. That's a really nice feature. The other thing to say about this charger is that the balance function supports up to 1.6 amps of balanced charge. And this is a bigger deal than many of you think, because the way the balance function on a charger works is that the charger pushes current into the main discharge lead and it pulls charge out, or pulls current out of the balance lead proportional to how much is needed to keep the cells balanced. And that's a discharge function, and turning discharge energy into heat is inefficient, and that limits how quickly the balance function can occur on many other chargers. With the 1.6 amp balance function, the charger will finish the balance cycle faster, and this is especially a big deal if you do big parallel charging arrays, because that little 300 or 500 milliamp balance current that many chargers have can really, it takes forever to balance a parallel array in that situation. Now, one of the things you'll see here is that the charger supports various different battery types. You can select lithium high volt, lithium polymer, lithium ion, LiFe, or this one, LiXX. And basically, that's just, well, I use any old lithium battery, you just let me figure it out. So if I select something like LiPo and I choose the charge function, you'll see it gives me a suggested cell voltage of 4.2 volts, and I can crank that up to 4.25 or down to 4.00. I've got just a little bit of wiggle room here if you want to just slightly over or just slightly undercharge your pack, but having selected a LiPo, it gives me the suggested range. If I set this to LIXX, it's on me to know that I'm charging a high volt and 4.35 is safe, or I'm charging a lithium ion and it needs to be at 4.10. It's on me, and I can select the full range, just set any charge voltage you want from 3.5 all the way up to 4.7 volts. Alex Vanover, are you listening? I call out, I like to pick on Alex Vanover for this because he is the guy who had his batteries light on fire at a major race because he was overcharging them.
And I'm going to show you the Vanover special today. Then you click start, and now you get the extra juice.
No! Oh my God!
Stop!
No! I didn't want you to actually do it.
That's how you do the Vanover special. Send it! Send it!
And it was right around 4.7 volts that they lit off. So this is expert mode. I kind of wish this wasn't here. If you're a beginner, don't use the LIXX function, and for gosh sakes, don't overcharge to 4.7 a lithium. That's bad. But you can set it. If you're the kind of person who thinks that's cool, then this may be the charger for you. Now, this charger has got a couple other auxiliary functions. It's got a USB power out, 5 volts, 2.1 amps. It's got a little micro USB here connector that you can hook it up to your computer to do fancy things with it there. And what is this? Are you for real? Yes, we are for real. It's got wireless charging for your phone. You can set your phone on top of it and charge it wirelessly. It's got a 5-watt output wireless charger. That's pretty slick. I don't know of anybody else who has that. Now I want to take a second and talk about the specs of this charger, because a lot of people don't know how to take a charger's specs and turn it into a practical answer to the question, how many batteries can I charge? How fast can I charge the battery? And we're going to start with the concept of a 1C charge rate. So right here we've got, this is an 1800 milliamp hour pack. A 1C charge rate is, you just take the capacity of the pack and you convert it to amps. So 1800 milliamp hours is 1.8 amp hours. So a 1C charge rate is 1.8 amps. And a 1C charge rate is the safest charge rate to use for a battery. You can charge them faster, and in fact, you can charge them faster without damaging them. Up to a 3 or even a 5C charge rate for modern high-performance LiPos can be completely healthy and not reduce the lifespan significantly, if at all. The disadvantage of higher charge rates is that if anything is wrong with the battery, like it's been damaged, it's been banged up, then higher charge rate makes it that much more likely that the battery's going to explode and light on fire and burn your house down. So best practice is to charge at 1C. Sometimes I charge at 2C. If I'm really in a hurry, I might charge it up to 5C, but I am right there. I'm like just literally babysitting the pack for the whole 10 minutes it takes to charge. And if I see it start to crinkle, or if I'm feeling it, and if I feel it starting to get hot, I stop. Okay. But now, I said 10 minutes it takes to charge, because that's the other way you can think about C rating and charging, a C rate of charge, which is at a 1C charge rate, the battery takes about an hour to charge. By definition, a 1C rate will fully discharge or charge a battery in 1 hour. The reason I say about an hour is that we seldom fully discharge our batteries, because it's bad for them to do that. And when you charge the battery, you've got the balance function at the end, which takes a little bit longer. So those two things kind of roughly cancel out. It usually takes about an hour to charge at a 1C charge rate. If you charge at a 2C charge rate, that's twice as fast. It's half the time. It takes about 30 minutes. If you charge at a 3C charge rate, that's about a third of an hour. It takes about 20 minutes. A 4C charge rate takes about 15 minutes. And a 5C charge rate takes about 10 minutes to fully charge the pack. So you can see there's significant advantages to charging faster, but also significant risks. Then how do you take the charger's rating, 200 watts, 650 watts, 15 amps, and use that to answer the question of how fast can I charge my batteries? Here's how. I'm going to use a calculator because I suck at doing math. So I'm going to just use a calculator. What you do is you take the watt rating, 200 watts. And by the way, this charger will do 200 watts when it's plugged into the wall on AC. It'll do 650 watts when it's plugged into a battery or a power supply, assuming that the power supply can handle that. But we'll take the 200 watt AC rating. And what you do is you divide by your battery voltage. So if it's a 4-cell battery, what I do is I divide by the fully charged voltage of the battery. So it'll be 200 watts divided by 16.8 volts equals 11.9 amps, which means that with a 200 watt rating pushing into a 4-cell battery, this charger could push 12 amps, roughly. So we'll round to 12 amps. And then you could say, well, how fast can I charge my battery? Well, this 1800 milliamp hour battery will charge at 1C. It'll charge at 1.8 amps. So what we can do is we can take 11.9 amps and divide by 1.8 amps. We could charge at up to a 6.6 C rate for this battery. So if we wanted to do that 10-minute 5C charge, this charger will do it. That's what we've figured out. Now, the other question that comes up is, are these ratings per channel, or are they for both channels at the same time? And I did some testing. I started a 10 amp charge cycle on one channel, and then I started a 10 amp charge cycle on the other channel. And what I saw was that the first channel went all the way down to basically a trickle, and it seems like you can only get about 200 watts total across both channels when you're running off AC. I ran it off of my 24 volt DC power supply, and I was able to do 15 amps into both channels at the same time. And so there you go. If you really want to get the most out of this charger, you're going to need to run it off of DC. And not just any DC. If you run this off of a 12 volt DC power supply, you're still going to be limited because the input amp rating is going to come into play, and that's something we haven't even talked about. The bottom line is, if you want to get more than about 200 watts out of most chargers, you have to run them on 19 or 24 volts. You can't run them off of 12 volts. I have a page on my website, fpvknowitall.com, showing the power supply that I built. And what I did is I spent about $20-25 on a 750 watt rack mount power supply and converted it to be a 750 watt. I soldered an XT60 on it and stuff. Converted it into a 750 watt 12 volt power supply. Again, though, that's a 12 volt power supply, not a 24 volt power supply. If you're real clever, there's a way you can get two 12-volt power supplies and convert them into one 24-volt power supply, and that's actually what I did. But that is way outside the scope of this document, this video. Take a look down in the video description if you want to see a link to that webpage where I show you all the parts to go into building the power supply, and also product links here as well. For the final part of this video, we're going to compare this charger to other ones on the market and see where it fits in terms of price per performance, and kind of who's the right person to buy this charger instead of some other one. The first one I thought of when I was trying to think of what's close to this was the ISDT D2. Now, the ISDT D2 is an AC only charger. It does not have DC input, so you're not going to be running this off of a car battery or anything in the field, not unless you have an inverter. It does 200 watts and 24 amps for 138 bucks. It seems to me like the Hobbymate kind of wins. It's only what is it? 100. It's only 10 bucks more expensive. It has DC input. If it's run off of DC, it has higher output. It has all those other things like has all the other things we've talked about. So I think the Hobbymate wins compared to the ISDT D2. The next one to look at is the SkyRC D400, which is a 400 watt charger. So on AC, it's twice the output of the Hobbymate, which can only do 200 watts total when it's running off of AC power. It's also a little bit bigger and heavier than the Hobbymate, which is just really notably smaller and lighter. So if you are thinking about field charging, the Hobbymate's certainly going to be preferable to this one. So whether you think the SkyRC wins this comparison kind of depends on how much you need the 400 watts of output from the AC/DC built-in supply, because of course you can easily get 400 watts or more out of the Hobbymate. You just have to run it off of DC. You have to have your own like 24 volt DC power supply. If you want 400 watts off of AC, the SkyRC is going to win, but you're going to pay a little bit of a premium for it. Now, you can't talk about chargers without talking about the iCharger line. He said, having talked about chargers without talking about the iCharger line many times in the past. Oops, sorry about that. The iCharger line is, it is just in a whole nother class. It is way more expensive. You get a lot more sort of features, and people talk about, oh, the build quality is so good, the calibration is so good, the performance is so good. The thing is, I think if you're looking at something like the Hobbymate for 150 bucks, it just feels to me like the 260 bucks here for the iCharger 308 Duo, either you're going to want to spend that or you're not. Now, things get really interesting when we cross over into the DC only chargers, because some people say, I don't want an AC, I got a power supply. And so the fact that the Hobbymate has a built-in supply might not rule it out, but it might not be a plus either. Now, right now, one of my go-to chargers is the ISDT T8, which will crank 1,000 watts and 30 amps. This really, for this charger, you only need it if you're charging really big batteries, or if you're charging really big parallel arrays, which is what parallel arrays are basically just really big batteries. And that's what I use it for. Now, this guy it just wins. It's 100 bucks. So it's 50 bucks cheaper, and that gives you 50 bucks to build your own 24 volt, 750, 1000 watt power supply, like I did. If you link in the video description, show how I did that. And you come out at pretty close to price parity, maybe a little bit more, but then you get this awesome power supply, and you can crank 1,000 watts and 30 amps, but it doesn't have the AC input. And of course, it's missing some of those other things. It's got a USB output, but it doesn't have the non-contact charging. It doesn't have regenerative discharge, many of those things that some people would want. The iCharger X6 is a new charger. I'm actually looking forward to reviewing this one. I hope I'm going to get one in the mail soon. This is an 800 watt 30 amp charger for about 150 bucks. And iCharger normally prices itself out of many of these comparisons, but here it's coming right in at the same price point. It is a DC only charger, so you are going to have to add the price of the power supply. But if you've already got the power supply, then that's not really a consideration for you. 800 watts, 30 amps out of something this small, that's pretty impressive. You can see here the XT60 for the size comparison about how big it is. And I guess the main thing that this gives up is that it doesn't have 2 channels. So if you wanted to charge two different types of packs, like a 4-cell and a 5-cell, or a 4-cell and a 2-cell, then you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd need 2 of these. And that brings us to the Q6 Pro, which right now I think the Q6 Pro is the best value for performance in charging today. For $60, you get 300 watts of output and 14 amps. And if you want 2 channels, just buy 2 of them. Now you spend $120 and you have 2 times 300 watts and 14 amps. But again, you don't have a AC power supply. You're going to need to build your own power supply. And if that for you, or buy it. And if that for you is a deal breaker, then you're going to want to focus on something like the D2, the Sky RC, or of course the Hobbymate. For me, the place where the Hobbymate fits in is this. Right now, when I travel, I bring with me a 750 watt power supply and 2 ISDT Q6 chargers, and it's a little bit cumbersome. I could see the Hobbymate replacing that setup. The 200 watt limit might come into play if I was in a real hurry to get flying, but and I could just bring the DC power supply with me and be good to go. But this would easily take the place of those 2 Q6s. It's slightly run on DC. It doesn't even perform any worse. It's like 350 watts and 15 amps. Yeah, this could easily take the place of those 2 Q6s and be just a little bit more compact and easier to manage. That is going to bring us to the end of this review, though. I think by now you know everything you need to know to decide if the Hobbymate D6 Duo is for you. I'm really happy to see it come out, because for those of us who don't want to use the DC power supply, having a built-in plug that just plugs into the wall is really nice. And I do think that it's hitting a really sweet spot in terms of price and performance. The feature set is really exciting, especially the wireless charging, but also the ability to do regenerative discharge and adjust the balance setting to exactly the voltage that you want. Those are really nice things. I'd love to see that get incorporated into other chargers. Links to all of this stuff are down in the video description, and they are affiliate links. You can see I purchased this item. Yeah, I purchased this item for review, and you guys can help me to defray those costs. But if I helped you make a purchasing decision, use those affiliate links. It really helps me out. I also have a Patreon that supports me. This is my full-time job. If you're new here, hi. If you're new here, you haven't heard me say that 27 times. Yep, I'm a full-time YouTuber. I do exactly what you see me doing now to pay the rent, put food on my family's table, and metaphorically speaking, we don't really have formal dinners very often. More like put food on a plate that you eat over the sink or while leaning into the fridge. Anyway, you can help me out. You know, all that. What was I saying? Thanks for watching. Happy flying, you guys. That's it. I'm out.